Hello and welcome along to the On the Whistle podcast. I'm your host, Zain Nabi, and today we have a very special show for you. We will be showcasing an interview with a living and breathing African football legend. Janine van Wyk, she's the captain of South Africa. She's led the team for over a decade, and she's the second highest capped international for men and women's football. She grew up in the suburbia of Johannesburg, but had to leave the comfort of her area because no girls were playing football. So she ventured into South Africa's townships, where she was able to play the sport that she loved. It's a fascinating interview and was conducted by our very own and newly minted women's football editor at large. What a mouthful. Firdose Moonda. Firdose, I know you're an award-winning journalist. You're based in Cape Town. You've covered the World Cup in South Africa, and you covered the African Cup of Nations in 2013. You're also very well known for your cricket writing and broadcasting and work with ESPN. It's a pleasure to have you join Africa's biggest braai. Tell me, why are you most excited to join the pod? What lens will you bring?
Thank you so much, Zain. Well, I'm most excited because I've got the best title ever. That's the most words anyone's ever used to describe me. But so that's cool. But yeah, as you mentioned, I'm mostly a cricket writer, and it's a little known fact that I started my career about 16 years ago, initially as a football writer. So I was part of the Wits journalism school program, and my first commissioned story was a match report on Bidvest Wits, I'll have you know, versus I can't even remember who, but it was
wasn't
like
very memorable, was it? Come on, you got to name
very memorable.
Who was the most talented footballer on the field? Give us that.
It was Energy Murambadoro, who was from Zimbabwe and playing at Wits and studying there at the time. I didn't do too much then. Very shortly after that, worked with you, in fact, at the E! News channel, which was South Africa's first 24-hour news channel, and we did a lot of crazy things there. And then, yeah,
you know why I'm laughing? It's been so long. I forgot we worked together at ENCA. I
was just telling people that's how I know you. But yeah, that is how I know you. Yeah, so I guess, I mean, what's really happened is I covered the Women's T20 World Cup, which is the Cricket World Cup, which was in the Eastern and Western Cape this year. And I've covered women's sport sort of on the periphery over the last 5 or 6 years. But this World Cup just completely energized me. South Africa reached the final, which honestly nobody would have predicted at the beginning. And just to see the levels of professionalism in the women's game. At the same time, Banyana were crowned WAFCON champions. I don't know, that doesn't sound cool. Hey, WAFCON champions, African champions, let's say. So I just thought, hell, you know, we've got this burgeoning brand of success for women's sport. And I'm a great listener to the BBC Women's Hour, so that's giving away something about me. But their power list was also women in sport, and they've been covering a lot of women in sports. And I thought, you know what, this is my area. I want to get back into covering football. I would like to try and cover women's football, and I specifically want to unearth stories from the global south, which I think is so different to what's happening in the global north.
100%. And not to talk about you in any way, but the very foundations of our podcast were to give Africans an opportunity to have discussions about things we're passionate about and give us an opportunity to shape that narrative.
Exactly. And I just think that the conversations in especially, like, let's take the England women's football team, for example, which are, you know, currently about ACL injuries and what's causing those. But also a lot of conversation around women's health in football, around perception. Those are not discussions we're really having in Africa. We're still at how do we get paid? So that's kind of what I want to bring to this. You know, women's sport is going through something really exciting. It's a revolution of sorts. It's also professionalizing so quickly that it is resulting in a lot of overuse, a lot of injury, a lot of overexposure for women who maybe are just taking the first step and suddenly they find themselves well into the deep end. And that's what I'm wanting to cover. So I was very excited when you were happy for my idea, and I'm hoping to, you know, bring you, I want to say regular, but, you know, those are dangerous words. So semi-regular interviews with Africa's, hopefully some of Africa's best and most interesting female footballers, but also, you know, really cover issues, because I think that's where you stand out to me, in that as we grew up saying, no normal sport in an abnormal society. And sport is not sport. It's more than the game. It shows us the absolute best in the world, and it makes us think about the absolute worst. So, let's do everything. Let's cover the full range. And that's what I'm here to do.
So poetically done as the writer you are, our new women's football editor at large. Bringing it back to the fascinating interview you did with Janine. We're in our WhatsApp group. We're all talking with our living and breathing legend, Courtney Fries, who's not on the pod today. And you were telling him that you actually developed a girl crush on Janine. Why is that?
Oh, she's just such a lovely person. Like, just speaking to her, I mean, first of all, to hear about a white South African going into a black township in the 90s really fascinated me. We had this like swart gevaar. Everybody was scared of what would it be like to mix with black people. I was the first child of color at my school. And in fact, some of the white families took their kids out of the school because they didn't want them mixing with the likes of me. So to see someone like Janine, who is, I guess, white and middle class, go into a township and then learn the culture there. She even called it learning the different language of the way that people spoke about the game there. Immediately, I related to her. Her stories of, dropping out of school, working at various schools, coaching, just trying to earn some money, finally getting a salary of football. She's down to earth. She's humble. She is phenomenally successful. I mean, the things she's done and the things she still wants to do are amazing. But most of all, she's giving back. She set up a football club right here in South Africa. She is trying to give visibility to women in the game. She is passionate. She believes in it. Like, I wanted to say to her at some point, listen, don't take this the wrong way, but can we be friends? Like, can we hang out sometime? So maybe when she watches this, she's going to be like, sure, I'm never speaking to that one again. But, she's cool. She's so inspiring. She's a true South African sporting hero.
Well, Firdose, you're a friend of mine. You're a friend of the shows. You're now, I'll say it for a third time, our women's football editor at large. And we're looking forward to the amazing conversations, interviews, and perspectives you'll bring to us. And we love hearing from our community out there. So guys, please don't forget, let us know what you think of our new football editor at large. Let her know some stories you'd like covered in the women's game and beyond. So hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at OTW_podcast. And you can always find us in YouTube and Facebook by simply searching for the On the Whistle podcast. And if you're listening to this on whatever platform you get your podcast or watching on YouTube, leave a rating, leave a review. Honestly, it helps people find the show and helps us pay Firdose the big money that she earns. But without further ado, Firdose, thank you for making your debut. You've scored a banger with Janine. And for those listening out there, enjoy the podcast. We're going to play it for you right now.
So, Janine, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me today. I mean, this is going to be incredible for people who want to know more about women's football. And I guess I want to start at the beginning. And I've done some of my homework on kind of, in fact, you grew up not far from me. I'm from Bedfordview and you're from Germiston. So
really?
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Germiston, Alberton, Edenvale. I've been all over the place.
You know it. And I know Score Metal, where you started off, because I used to score for their cricket club a long time ago.
Really?
Small world, hey?
Wow. Very small.
Yeah, can you tell me kind of how that started? I mean, you would have started off with boys, like so many girls do, and what was that whole process like to the point where you got to playing for the national team?
Yeah, well, I started playing in our garden with my cousins. I grew up in a football family environment. My uncles, my cousins all played football, except my parents. They were not very athletic at all. And that's how I started playing football, got my interest from it, from my uncle's side, always on the side of a football pitch, watching my cousins play football. And every school holiday, I had my cousins over, I had friends over playing football in the garden, and eventually grew up playing in a boys club, only club. I mean, as you mentioned before, I think girls from our generation that grew up playing football always started with boys, because there weren't many opportunities, there weren't many girls partaking in the sport. And just played with the boys from the age of 5 up until 14, where I really had to go and seek for a football club that was women only in a football league, which was very difficult in the area that I came from. You had your, if I can say, your white girls that played, hockey and netball and so on, and each were the sports that I played, but my love was always football, and had to go into the township areas where football was a lot more popular in the African communities, and I headed my way to Springs in the east of Johannesburg, in a little township called Kwatema, and that was thanks to Fran Yilton Smith, the former technical director of South African Football Association. She watched me play on numerous occasions with the boys, and when we finally reached out to her to try and get a women's team to play for in a women's league, this was the nearest team that I could go and play for. And it was difficult at first, being the only white girl in this league. It was called the Sanlam League back then, if I remember correctly. And it was difficult, being the only white girl, having to learn the different culture and background, different language that was spoken. And it was really difficult to fit in at first, but I was welcomed at first with open arms, because they accepted me coming into the community, respected me for coming into the community, not being afraid, although I was a little bit at first. I was very young. I was 13, 14 years old. I've never seen such living conditions in my life before. So it was frightening, but, it made me realize how privileged I actually was growing up and what I had. And that's where it all started, in that league. And I was selected one out of 21 girls to go and be at the High Performance Center in Pretoria, where Fran Yilton Smith was the one that actually got all the girls together, the talented ones out of the country, to go and stay there. And it was almost like a football academy and school. And that was where the under-19 South African junior team was selected. And then from there, having played there, got selected for the senior women's national team in 2005. And here I am, and having played for so many years with the national team and served the country for so many years, it's been quite a journey and an experience to be where I am today.
And what you say is so interesting, because a lot of the sport that I cover is about Black players going into a white environment and feeling awkward, cricket, rugby, those types of things. But I mean, this is the opposite of that. So did you feel, I mean, you say it was difficult, but did you feel very othered, or was it like, wow, this is the country I'm in. It's a Black majority country, and I want to be with these people?
I mean, at first, I thought that I was one of very, very few white girls that played football, because there weren't many in the boys' leagues that I played with. I think maybe identified one or two, and those one or two actually joined me at the High Performance Center. So it was 3 white girls out of 21. And that was it. So I really didn't think that there were so many white girls that took interest in the game. And it was strange at first, because we all had different views on life. And as I said, they lived in their little communities. Some of them didn't have any shoes or football boots, and here I was, getting football boots every second month, third month, that whenever I wanted, so it just really brought me back down to earth, and realized that these girls, without the resources, without the equipment, they still loved the game and could give their best no matter what environment they were in.
Sure, yeah, incredible. And I mean, I guess then from there, did any of them go on to play professionally with you? And when you went into the national team, was it similar, or were girls quite well resourced?
No, I think having played in the league and being identified in the league already as the smart girl playing with us or against us, I was well respected already going into a high performance center. I was already profiled as a player, which made it a lot easier for me. Although it wasn't easy staying with other people around me, I'm still am a very big family person. I love to have my family around me all the time. And being 16, 17 years old and going into a high performance center, almost like a boarding school, something that I wasn't used to, I really couldn't cope. I only stayed there for 6 months, whereas with some of the girls that I stayed with and went into, they stayed for up to 4 years. And that's something I couldn't do because I needed my family with me for all the time. And they made it really difficult because they didn't want to give us the same privilege of having our parents that live nearby to come and visit us, whereas the girls that had parents from all over the country couldn't do that. So they restricted parents from coming to visit all of us. So we were only able to see our parents once or twice a month over the weekend. And that's something that I couldn't deal with, and unfortunately stepped out. And, I was told that if I done that, then I would jeopardize my opportunities playing for the national team. And it was obviously a big decision that I had to make, but I'm always one to make a decision, whatever's going to make me happy. And at that time, I, chose my family, and I thought, football will eventually take me somewhere, whether it's in the national team, whether it's abroad. At that time, I had big dreams, although I didn't know much about football being played abroad because it wasn't really exposed as much. But I knew that there were clubs, there were academies, Arsenal academies, and that was a big dream that I had of playing abroad one day. So it didn't really stop me from just, stepping out of that environment and continue to work hard and, still was very hopeful that I would eventually get somewhere.
Yeah. So when did you first get a contract or like earn some money off football, or when did you think, hey, I've got a career here?
Well, hey, that didn't come very early in my career. That's why I tell many young girls today that, success doesn't have to come at a young age. And that's something that I work towards as many times. I mean, I don't even have a matric to this day because of football. There's many times that I came in and out of football camps with the national team, missed a lot of exams. And again, it's choices that I make for myself. I have a grade 10, I think the standard 8 back then.
Okay.
And that's all I had because of football. And it was a risk that I took, and I won't suggest it to any other footballer. That's why it's very, very important to have an education and balance the two. But back then I found it really difficult to balance because, your teachers and principals back then, especially me being an Afrikaans speaking person, back then, I wouldn't say right now I can speak it really well, but it was difficult to persuade them to give me that opportunity to come back and write my exams. Because for them, especially football, wasn't a big sport for them. And I had many teachers and principals tell me that the sport would literally not get me anywhere. And it was, again, my passion and love, and it's something that I wanted to pursue. And throughout, after dropping out of school, I had my family take care of me, and any income that I would get was from coaching on the side, coaching in schools, coaching all kinds of different sporting codes, not only football. And I tried to introduce women's football into the different schools, which was many times I was rejected because it wasn't a very popular sport to play for girls. But I managed to coach cricket. I managed to coach hockey, netball that I played just for a little bit of income, and also having to have an established name already in the senior national team, I used that name to do one-on-one coaching with girls, and that was my income.
Sure.
And only at a later stage in the national team were we given, you know, an incentive. I wouldn't even say a salary, because we were never contracted. It's still that the national team is still not contracted to this day. It's you come in, still not contracted. We are not contracted.
Wow.
So it's basically you come into, you're being selected for the national camp, and for your national duty, you get paid for the duration of the time that you in camp, and then obviously your bonuses that you get. Yeah, not many people know that, but we are not contracted.
I can't believe that.
Contracted back then. So back then we used to all, you know, stand in one line and receive our envelope for the
little,
week's, for the week's work, a little incentive, which I was really excited and happy about, and that was my income. And then my first contract, actually professional contract, came at age 29 when I finally got a contract in America, in the States for Houston Dash, and that was my first contract and my first paycheck that I actually received playing football. So dreams do come true, and whether it's at a young age or a very later age. That's why I say, you know, with young girls right now playing football, they have so many opportunities right now going for them at every angle, you know, whether it is playing the game, whether it is, you know, being a presenter, whether it's being a coach, you know, there's so many opportunities for them. And back then there weren't many. So I really grounded my career through and through. Many risks that I took, many sacrifices that I made to get to the level that I am, you know, playing today. So, yeah.
Wow. And I mean, you played in the US, you played in Glasgow, now you're in Greece. I imagine you're earning some money, hopefully, this whole time. What's the difference in terms of like in terms of their structure must be, you know, super professional, all those three places, compared to a South African structure? Like, is it almost a miracle that we've qualified for a World Cup when, to me, it just seems like the worlds are different?
I must say that, you know, South Africa has done so well in terms of our women's game and reaching the World Cup stage, especially 2019 World Cup. There's so many other World Cups that we've missed out on. But I mean, if you look at Nigeria, the powerhouses of African football, Cameroon, all those teams that also qualified for World Cup, they also have limited resources. They don't have established leagues in their countries either. I think Africa as a whole needs to really develop much more. I think the gap between African football and the rest of the world has a long way to go still. But slowly but surely we are closing that gap. But without limited resources, without proper competitive league, we were still able to reach that level of the World Cup and the Olympics, and qualifying for such. And that's why it will take a lot for South Africa and really any other African country to win such a major competition, because of lack of development and lack of resources that we have in our continent, really. So people really expect miracles when they hear South Africa, you know, is going to win the World Cup. It's not going to happen in the near future. A lot has to be done in order for us to reach that. But after qualifying for the Olympic Games in 2012 and again in 2016, I think that was for many of us our breakthrough to international level football. And that was certainly my breakthrough in international football when I was scouted for the Houston Dash in the Olympics 2016. But without such major tournaments, it's really difficult for the clubs internationally, the big clubs, to actually identify the talent that we have and possess within our country. We have so many girls. I mean, I think currently we have about 8 or 9 girls playing abroad in different countries. Whereas a couple of years ago, there may be 1 or 2, if that play abroad. So our breakthrough comes when we play these major competitions. And I do believe that after this World Cup again, we will have many of our South African players playing abroad, being identified because of their talent. But, you know, we have a league that is currently running, the Hollywood Bet Super League, which has been launched for 2 years now. And it's really becoming a competitive platform. If you look at the games, we get to watch it now on TV, it's being broadcasted, it's being spoken about on social media. So the recognition in our country is becoming, for women's football, is becoming more popular. And the women's game, and just the women's game globally, is being, you know, spoken about. You hear about the UEFA Champions League, you see tickets being sold out at major stadiums. So the women's game overall globally is increasingly, you know, getting a lot more recognition and popular in the public eye. And that is initially what we always wanted. And it's the right time that now it's being elevated to such.
Yeah. I mean, you spoke about Africa and you mentioned Nigeria and Cameroon. Can I ask specifically about Morocco? I mean, obviously you beat them to win the AFCON, but they seem to be flying, women and men. You know, they've got girls playing in English leagues and the men are doing so well. Are they doing something particularly different? And do you expect them to go pretty far at the World Cup?
Morocco is a flying African country at the moment, and that is because they are so well invested in their teams, from development structures up until their first teams, their men's and women's teams. I mean, we were in Morocco for the African Women's Cup of Nations, and we went and trained at their facility, their national facility, and it was top notch. It was like you were in a European country. They had so many fields, they had gym facilities. You could see that they're really investing in their teams and their players, and it all comes from, you know, play investments, player development from a young age, and getting the right structures right. And it's something that we are currently lacking as South Africans. We don't have many developing structures, especially for girls. If we're looking at girls specifically, women specifically, we don't have. It's just right now that we have the top teams playing in the Hollywood Bet Super League, and we have the SASA League that's been, you know, a women's football pioneer for so many years. But what is happening below those leagues? It's really nothing. You have so many girls that are now interested in playing the game, but they are still playing with boys, which is not a bad thing, because I think it actually increases your performance playing with the boys. But there are no structures there. There are coaches, educators put in place for these girls to actually learn and educate themselves about the game. It's one thing of the girls just being put on a football field and playing, but are they actually learning to play the game? And that is the difference between where Morocco has got it right and where we still are currently lacking.
Yeah, amazing that you say that. I mean, I know you've got a bit of a coaching qualification, and I mean, I just want to ask you about where you see yourself from here. I mean, I'm assuming you want to play in this World Cup, but do you feel you're in there, or do you think soon it's to coaching? I suppose you're not getting younger, right?
Well, it's a bit catchy at the moment. I mean, I know I'm sitting at an age where, you know, the coach is feeling that she needs to give younger players an opportunity to play at World Cups, you know, to start off their careers, possibly get identified for bigger leagues to play in. But also on the other end, using your experienced players to really grab hold of the team, that players that have played at, you know, myself being at a World Cup already, at 2 Olympic Games, using that experience. I guess it's very difficult for the coach to decide, you know, what kind of route that she wants to take. I haven't been part of the preparations for the World Cup as late, and it's highly disappointing for me to not have been included in preparations, to be given that opportunity to see if I'm still worthy, if I could, you know, still use my experience. Am I valuable enough? I don't know. It's disappointing, of course, but at the end of the day, it is not about me. It is about the country and taking the best team possible to go and represent South Africa at the World Cup. And I always wanted to be a football coach, educator, and stay in the game. I mean, I took risks of dropping out of school and many sacrifices that I put aside for football. There's no way I'm just going to turn my back on football. So I'm always going to be within the game, whether I'm on the pitch or on the side of the pitch, you know, giving instructions to other players and the younger generation. So I've always wanted to pursue my coaching badges, and I'm still busy, you know, looking at what the next level is, which is UEFA A license, UEFA Pro license, and that is something that I want to do, and it would happen in the near future. Most definitely, I am ready to hang my boots, so they say. Not yet. I think maybe give myself a year or so, a season to continue and squeeze out the most that I can playing the game. I'm not ready to give up just yet because I feel I still can contribute to the game. Whether that is retiring in South Africa, that is something that I would like to do in my home country. And then start off my coaching career. That is something that I definitely want to do. And now I have a badge to do that. I'm able to coach in the Hollywood Bet Super League. I'm able to coach a professional club that's as an assistant somewhere. So yeah, wherever the road may take me after my playing career, you know, I'm open to anything.
Yeah, and just in terms of that, I mean, I know you've got your own football club. Was that part of your vision that you wanted to start something, maybe not for yourself to coach, but just that can develop the game? I mean, it seems this is really where your heart lies.
Yeah, I think my heart lies with, first of all, having established JVW Girls Football Development or Football Club. Was mainly to give opportunities to young girls and a platform for them to be identified and grow in the game. That was initially it. It was established in 2012 when women's football wasn't really recognized then. But yet I wanted to see a change. I wanted to be the change in that. I wanted to have more girls partake in this game. And I slowly but surely, as I coached in the schools, and being rejected by so many principals and sports coordinators in the schools, I wanted these girls to have a platform to play, which is why, you know, I created this environment for them to come into and being able to showcase what they love, which was football. And it's just grown tremendously, you know, from a Saturday, you know, once a month Saturday development program to having it every Saturday to having it now a full-on program where I have about 100 girls in the development program.
Amazing.
In Bedfordview. And also in the schools league, finally. in the schools league, that's where it actually started. Knocking on doors many times. At schools, you know, having to start a girls team, and eventually got about 9 or so school teams that actually wanted to start the league in 2012. And yeah, there were about 323 girls that partook in this JVW Schools League in 2012, and currently we are sitting with over 3,000 girls partaking in the JVW Schools League. So there's so many girls more playing now, and yeah, it's fantastic phenomenal to see the growth in the game and just what I've done. But it wasn't to coach; it was just mainly to give the girls an opportunity to actually have a platform to express themselves in the game.
Sure. Yeah, that's amazing. Well done. That's an amazing story. I know you said maybe you're ready to retire and that sort of thing, but can you tell me a bit about, you know, the Olympics, but also winning AFCON? Like, that's pretty huge, you know. I mean, I remember 96 with Bafana winning AFCON. Do you feel it was comparable? Did we celebrate you guys enough? Or like, how did you feel the reception went?
Oh no, we were well celebrated. I remember. I mean, it's always been my dream. I mean, since 2005, um, up to this AFCON, it was my 8th edition for the AFCON, and you know, every AFCON I was like, we're gonna win this one, we're gonna win this one. We just, fell short with a silver medal, with a bronze medal, with a silver medal, and never that gold. And eventually now I can say that I finally had a gold medal around my neck. I lifted the trophy. It was an amazing feeling, and it was at the right time because women's football is exploding at the moment. Everyone was following Banyana Banyana. It wouldn't have felt as great winning it in 2010 when we hosted it, because it was only a minority that actually followed the national team, the women's team. But this time it felt bigger, it felt better. We were celebrated. We came home. The whole airport was packed full of people, welcoming us home, celebrating us. Still getting goosebumps thinking about that moment. And then obviously days after that, we were celebrated. We were on the news, we were in papers. People started following women's football. Now people are actually following women's football in our country, not only the national team, but at club level. And that is something that we as a national team created. So I'm just so happy that we won that. We were crowned African champions, and it was the most extraordinary feeling for me. Waited for so many years to actually lift that trophy, and finally did. And it was an incomplete dream of mine. Before I retired, I always wanted to lift the African trophy, and I did that as a captain, and it's just extraordinary feeling. I've actually achieved everything that I wanted to achieve, although there's one more that I need to achieve before I retire, which I'm pretty sure I'll get, which is being 2 appearances away of holding the record for the highest footballer, male or female, in Africa. So that is something that I am striving towards, and I'm hoping to get before or after the World Cup. We'll see.
Oh, you better get it. I mean, I'm going to write that. You got to get it. And I want to ask you a bit about, you said after the AFCON, when I saw an article that girls must be a bit mindful of how they spend their money. And I mean, you've just told me the story about contracts. How do you feel about pay? Would you like, I mean, we're so far away now, it feels silly asking, but should the women get equal pay to the men, given, South Africa has equal rights? Or just what do you want to see happen? Does corporate South Africa come in? How can the game grow financially for women?
There's so many countries. You look at USA, you look at Denmark, you look at Norway. They're all actually invested in their women's teams. And although it was a long, hard fight from the woman, actually, started with Megan Rapinoe in the USA. She got it right for her country to get equal pay from the men's side, and I believe South Africa can do that too, to have equal pay as much as the men are getting. Although our daily allowances have increased to the same amount as what the men do get, equal pay in some sense, but bonuses and so on. I think where South Africa is heading is the women and the men don't have the same sponsors, which is very difficult for them to say, right, everyone's going to get equal pay. If you look at the US national team, the whole banner is under one sponsor. Right, so it's easy for the sponsor to come and say, we will give them equal pay. Whereas women, currently, we are sponsored by Sasol, and the men are, for instance, sponsored by Castle for many years. So it's very difficult for the association to come in and say the woman needs to get paid equally if it's 2 different sponsors. So where they can either match each other or find a way to sponsor. But yeah, one thing that they can change is having contracts in place for the woman, and that's something that USA have got right for many years, although USA players don't get paid a salary from their clubs that they that they represent, but they get paid a monthly salary from their association. If they're contracted for 2 years, they can use that player for 2 years in the national team or for a year or so on. Whereas very difficult with the South African players, because we just come in and out as we perform, really. So
crazy.
You know, if you have a contract in place, at least you can use that player and you can monitor that player as much as you want for a period of time, however long the contract is.
But so do our club players get contracts? Or not at all either?
Our club players right now, there's only really 1 or 2 clubs that contract our players, although JBW Football Club do contract our players, but we can only for up to a year. But that's the association rule. It can't be for up to 2 or 3 or 5 years. You go year by year. So if after the season's done and completed, any other club can come in and take whatever player they want, really.
Right.
But that you only contract for that year. So it's very difficult because female footballers in our country, even though they play in this Hollywood Bet Super League, they still, some teams don't even pay their players because of lack of funding. They don't have sponsorships, although the association and Hollywood Bets give a certain amount monthly, but that is it covers the costs for your transportation from Cape Town to Johannesburg or so on, and your meals for your players when you're traveling, and that is about it. So it's not really for the players to get paid. So it's very difficult for some teams to still pay their players. So some players are actually still, you know, juggling a full-time job and playing football at the same time, it's very difficult to do. But no, I think it's only Sundowns ladies that are, and UWC, the universities that fully contract their players and pay their players monthly and a good salary.
Just thinking about women's sport, and I mean, when you mentioned professionalism, I thought maybe this is not relevant, but you know, we're talking about things in Europe like cycle tracking, women on their periods, how to accommodate for, you know, the various women things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, and even like an embracing of different sexualities and all that sort of stuff. And Africa seems way behind that. I mean, is that a thing? Like, do you train? I don't know if I can ask you if you train differently, but is it a thing that people are concerned? Look, women's bodies are different. They have periods. They go through whatever's. Or is it, do you think we're just so far behind, we're not even touching that conversation?
No, I don't think it's only South Africa or Africa as a whole that is behind. I think certain countries are behind in lacking knowledge about training different. And I'm one to say that the woman's body is very different to a male body. You can only push a woman's body can only push so much. And if you look at the research and you look at the competitions that are currently coming in for the women's game, the UEFA Champions League, the league games, cup games that are hosted in Europe, and so many injuries and so many players that are now currently injured due to ACL injuries specifically, because, you know, associations and federations want to imitate the men's game for the women. They want to give the woman as much as they are giving the men in terms of competition, but they're not giving the woman the same resources as the men have. For instance, you have Manchester City men's team that have up to 8 physios taking care of every single player every minute. They are spending time with players that are injured on a daily basis for hours, where you have the Man City team having 2 physios, and they have to still take care of all those injuries at a time, where they're spending less time with that injured player. So we don't have the same resources as what the men have, but we have the same competition. So they are pushing the woman's body to its limit, but we can't withhold the ssame capacity as what the male body can hold, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of sense.
So yes,
yeah.
you know, your menstrual cycle plays a huge part in female getting injured a lot quicker because you want to push the woman's body, you want them to have strength and conditioning sessions in the morning and still perform 2 days later in a high intensity match. You know, it's very different. So yeah, I think that is my view on that, and I don't think it's only Africa that lacks that knowledge, but I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done in order to fix that mentality and bring in more resources for the women's game.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of it from the perspective that, you know, the demands are huge, right? I mean, your body must be, you're 36. Like, how does your body feel day to day?
Well, look, I'm not currently playing at that level like most other countries and teams are playing right now. But when I was in the States playing, it was a gym session in the morning, and then you get a rest period of an hour and you go and train again and then train later in the evening. It's a lot of demands, and your body does take a lot of strain, and people don't think about all the traveling hours and hours to get. I mean, you look at, I recently watched the Matildas documentary. I mean, that is the Australian national team, and Australia is so far away from Europe, and most players play in Europe, so they week in, week out, they are competing at a high level. And then when they get called for the national team, they have to fly 18, 19 hours to get to Australia to start a training camp again and to work with the girls. So they don't have much time for their bodies to adapt to jet lag and to adapt to have their bodies rest in order to perform again in the next 2 days. So they're flying back and forth, and they're putting so much demand on their bodies and their minds to be able to perform. And that is where, you know, you have a lot of injuries happening in the women's game.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're so right. I know you have to go now. So just, I guess, as a last thing, what's your kind of wish for women's football in the next, and you've been playing for what, but basically your whole life. So let's say in the next 10 years, what would you love to see happen and change?
No, I would most definitely, we touched up on this, is see, you know, the women's game being treated like the men's game, and it's slowly getting there in terms of competition being put in place. Also, I feel we need financial backing in the women's game as well. I know Europe, they earn a lot of money, the women's team, but if I can speak for Africa, I think a lot has to be done in Africa in terms of the women's game, in terms of the development, in terms of funding. And I think, therefore, if I know South Africa has now bid for the 2027 FIFA Women's World Cup, I think that would be huge for Africa as a whole, not only South Africa, because it will actually increase visibility to showcase the women's game, having the best of the best players come into Africa and play, you know, and use it as a business model for sponsors to show that there's so many people that are enthusiastic about the women's game, that it's real. Like, it is, women can play football and make money off of it. Don't have to juggle a full-time job and still play because they love the game so much. I would like to see the women's game flourish so much where they are at the point where the men are at now, that they can make it a full-time career playing football from a young age. They have opportunity to do that, and I think it is going that direction. I think it would take maybe a couple of years to get it to where the men's game is. I wouldn't say that the woman, a female football player, would earn as much as Messi or Ronaldo. I wouldn't see that happening ever in a lifetime. But in order to actually sustain a lifestyle that the men are currently, sustaining themselves with, having a family, having just a full-time career out of being a professional football player.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope so too. And I really hope we get that World Cup bid. So I'm starting my coverage now in 2023 to build us up until 2027.
Good.
Thank you so much,
I
Janine.
really hope.